Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tanner's Favorite Things. I'm Tanner Knight, and today we've got a whole mess of drum stuff to talk about. I just picked this setup locally, and it is indeed a vintage Tama Superstar set from probably the late 70s. I'm not exactly sure on the date, but based on a few factors that I just did some preliminary looking, I think it's a late 70s, 78, 79. And I'll tell you why I think that in a little bit. But I got all of this stuff here, all of this stuff in one purchase. Unfortunately, this gentleman was a drummer in his younger days and decided that these drums were not getting played enough. So he just sold the whole thing to me. We got the kick, the toms, the snare stand, hi-hat stand, 2 cymbal stands, the Omnisphere tom mount, a little bag with a drum key, some camber cymbals, and this Tama bass kick pedal. There's also a throne in here. Can't really see it, but there is a throne. And yeah, it's basically the whole thing. Everything that you would need to play a complete drum set, but this is really an older Tama Superstar set in the Super Mahogany color. And it's a little more matte than I'm used to for a Superstar set. And for reference, just so happen to have a Superstar maple set right here. And you can see how much more reflective it is. It's a high gloss finish. And I would imagine they kind of went through a few different iterations of their finishes over the years. And this one appears to just be a bit more matte or satin. But it is in fact a full 100% birch drum set. All birch, even though it does have mahogany in the name, much like this kit, which is called Super Maple, also 100% birch. But this kit, it does have the more desirable sizes. This is the smaller sized kit, basically the 22 by 16, I think. It might be a 14-inch depth. We'll have to get that dimension. Can't tell just by looking. But then we have the 12, 13, and 16 by 16 floor tom, and just really standard sizes. And all of the hardware that comes with this is the Tama Titan hardware set from, I guess, the same era. And it's really awesome. I've seen pictures of all of this stuff in the catalogs, but I haven't really had a chance to encounter it in the wild. And it's just great, great hardware. Really rock solid for the era, and it set the tone for the 80s. Everything on this set is 100% original from what I can tell. It's just like a time capsule. It has been used. I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but everything is together. And even the hardware, the mounting hardware, everything seems to be original. So that's really awesome. And I love encountering a drum set out in the wild that has been loved, but is no longer needed. And hopefully I can give it a better home. So we're going to take this thing apart, clean it up. It's actually never been cleaned from what I can tell. So I'd like to take it 100% apart and just wipe it down, see what kind of mysteries are lurking underneath. I already found one kind of bad thing about this set. The tom, the 16-inch tom, has some delamination that's happening on the other side of it, the non-batter side. So we'll take a look at that here in a second, but there is a little bit of delam there, so we'll have to inspect every other drum and make sure that all of the plies are perfectly together. And speaking of this one here, I'm actually going to fix it. I'm going to clamp that up and glue it up, so we'll see that process as well. But it's an old vintage set, so it's going to have some weirdness. It's going to have some old school styling. And take a look at this. I'm pretty sure this is the original batter head for this 16-inch floor tom, a Tama Ambassador USA head. And it looks like it's been unused. There's actually an identical one underneath here. It's the same Tama. It's a Remo head, but he must have had 2, and this one never got used. Otherwise, the heads are not good. We have reso heads on the batter side here, so I'm going to have to swap those around. But really what I want to do is take everything apart on this set and just get it down to the bare shells, wipe them down with a little bit of the one polish, and see if we can get a little more beauty out of these birch shells. There's no mahogany in this set at all, And the type of mahogany that would have been used in this era is called Luan or Meranti, and it's a Philippine mahogany that's kind of a softer hardwood, and they've stopped using it due to availability, but for now it's kind of equivalent to poplar or basswood. Another really cool thing about all of this stuff is that all of these stands are the Titan series. So they are Tama Titan stands from the era of this Superstar set of drums. So probably 1979, 78. I'm basing that also on the fact that these tension rods do not have the knurled surface on here or textured surface. They're just the regular old chromed T-rods. But they are original, and that's what they were back in the 70s before they had that little textured handle on there. This kick predates the Iron Cobra, but it is a pretty fancy ordeal here. If you look at all of the stuff going on, the spring is out here to the right, and a big old cam. So really cool kick, but the cymbals are probably the worst part of this set, and I'm not too sad about that. There's plenty of value here to not have to worry about these cymbals, but they did come with it, and they're pretty beat up, and they look like they're just some crappy bronze, like a B8 or cheaper type of material. So the camber cymbals are not high end, but we have them, and we'll take a listen here. Luckily, we do have a brand new Remo Weather King pinstripe on the batter side of this kick, so that's cool. Everything else is pretty worn. All of the heads basically need a refresh, and other than that, these drums need to be cleaned up. Probably get a screwdriver on all of the screws inside, make sure those lugs are rock solid, and then we should be ready to rock and roll. Another thing to note is that this set is definitely a player's grade set from a condition standpoint. Although everything is original and nothing has been messed with, this thing has been moved quite a bit. It looks like it's been gigged and thrown in the back of a van. The worst part is definitely the hoop, where the kick pedal interfaces with the hoop. Just a little bit of rash on the inside of it, and I assume the outside, but we'll have to take this thing apart and see that. But you do get the square-edged claws that are really just great claws and great hardware for this kick drum. It's no wonder why this thing has lasted over 40 years and probably sounds awesome, but I actually haven't had a chance to play it, so we got some things to do. So here we are looking at the Rezo side of the 16 by 16 inch floor tom, and there's some good delam right here. It's just between two layers, so it shouldn't be too much to get some glue in there, but that's the case in a couple different spots, like here, and that appears to be it. Otherwise, the bearing edge is not abused, and the lamination looks as it should. And just to look at the seam here, this looks like it might be a little more space here than some other Tama drums, but you do see the diagonal seam, which is very characteristic of Tama. But what you don't see a lot of the time on these drums is a real chatoyant effect on the inside. Look at this, that's beautiful. Look at all the wood grain. It's like a friggin', I don't know, something beautiful, but it's really, really nice, and that's the type of workmanship that you can expect from these late 70s, early 80s Tama Superstars, and they're just such good drums. So this is actually a pretty good-sized crack here, nothing to really be too concerned about, but it's really a fairly large crack that I don't want in there when I'm playing these drums. And maybe that's why the previous owner decided to go with the concert tom style. He saw that and decided not to put any more tension on it. I don't know. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this Titebond 3, which is the glue that we're using for this process, and I just put a little bit of it on here, and you can see it's pretty runny wood glue, which is what you want. So I just have a little on my palette here, and I have a toothpick to get it in the actual groove. So that's what we're going to do here, is try to get some of this, as much of this glue in the crack as possible, and work it down just as far in there as it'll go. And you'll have to get a little bit of it kind of on the sides here, so don't worry about the bearing edge being too disrupted by this. We're going to get a wet cloth here and wipe it down as best we can before we get the clamps on here, which is the next step in the process. We gotta clamp this down. So I've got a bunch of cardboard sleeves just like this that I'm going to use to protect the finish inside and out, even though these clamps that I have rubber heads and feet, whatever you want to call them, to protect the surface from whatever you're clamping already. But we're going to go a little step further and just protect the finish as best we can with the cardboard sleeve. So I'm just working this glue in here as best I can, and it will seep out when we clamp it. So that's another thing to be concerned or at least aware of. But you can see by using the toothpick or like a bamboo skewer, you can kind of really work the glue where it needs to go. And we're going to give this a tap and let gravity really help us out towards the end before we get the clamps on as well. So that's why we have this Titebond 3 kind of runny style wood glue to run in here. And gravity's going to do a good job on its own, but we're going to help it with a little tap here in a second. So luckily this is just literally one seam that's coming apart here, and I need more glue, so reapply there. That's a good sign. Plenty of it's getting down in there. But if there's multiple plies that are coming apart, then that's probably symptomatic of some other issues going on with the shells. So I don't know if this is worth doing this if you have a bunch of these plies that are coming apart. That probably indicates that there's been some water damage or something like that to the shells. And I'm sorry if I'm out of screen here. I know I got it tightened up on that one spot, but I'm just going all the way down the rim, down this bearing edge, applying as much of this glue into the seam as I can. But as I was saying, if there's multiple lamination delams, multiple points where it's coming apart, probably, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your drums, but they might be toast. So unfortunately, this crack does go quite a way around the shell. Not 100% all the way around, luckily, but it goes, I don't know, a good 50%, maybe 40% around the shell in one way or another. And it's not the same distance or width all the way around. Some of these delamination points are much smaller and require less glue, but we're going to hit them just the same and clamp them down just so we can be done with it. This spot that I'm affixing right now, I'm not sure if it's in frame. Apologize if not, but this is the last spot, and it's just a tiny little isolated separation, and it just terminates right there. The rest of the bearing edge looks really good. These early 80s and late 70s Tama drums, and most of the MIJ made in Japan stuff of the era, Yamaha, Pearl, they also have a rounded bearing edge like this, so it's not a sharp 45 bearing edge, very rounded, more like a 30. Okay, this is my first primary rub. I'm taking a damp cloth and just rubbing it down the bearing edge so none of this glue will dry on the outside. This is going to obviously need to be redone because once we get the clamps on here, it's going to squeeze some more glue out. But I'd like to just remove all of the outer glue from the bearing edge so we don't have to do any sanding. Okay, so next we are going to start clamping. I'm going to take this spot right here and start clamping it off. I'm going to go one right in the middle, and you can see a little bit of that glue squeeze out of there. I want to readjust this so I can wipe it off a little easier, but we do want it very close to the top. We want to get that seam as tightly closed as possible. And you don't need to really just crank down hard on these. They will be fine with a moderate amount of pressure. There's some benefits and drawbacks to drums being made of plywood, and not all drums are made of plywood, but most are. I would say that 99% of all drums in the world are made of plies of wood rather than a single piece of wood. But that's not 100% the case. There are some snares that are made from one single piece of wood. There are some other drums manufactured that way as well. So the good side is that it's easy to repair. If you have a problem with a single ply drum, I mean, there's not much you can do other than recut it. And, you know, that's not always the best option. But with the plies, you can really make some quick and easy repairs without having to reinvent the wheel here. I think just one more. And one last wipe with a wet paper towel. What you do not want to do is glue the cardboard protector to the bearing edge, because that's just cleanup that you'll have to do afterwards. But that's what I'm going to consider done here, and let this sit for a little bit and we'll come back to it and hopefully we'll be ready to rock after that. Before. After. This is probably the worst mark right here on this tom, the 12-inch tom. Otherwise, the shell's looking very nice. Not abused at all. Little bit of pitting right here, but nothing that breaks through the finish. I thought I had the 12-inch in the last one. This is actually the 12-inch here, and the last one was the 13-inch tom. But this is the before. Filthy. Especially in here. That's the before. After. This one is also in very good shape. There's a little bit of pitting along this one. Let's see if I can get it so you can see that. But it's not going through the surface or the finish at all. It's just a few dings. Kind of light buckle warming is the equivalent on a guitar. This is cool. You can see the diagonal seam pretty starkly right there. These bearing edges are looking great. Maybe a few little dings here and there, but overall this is what I would call a nice rounded bearing edge, and it looks good. Here's the reso side just for reference. Beautiful. One thing I'd like to disclose that I found is that this is the muffler for the 12-inch tom, and it is broken. That's where the spindle goes through here, and there's supposed to be another little tab that goes out about here, but that's broken off. So I'm not inclined to replace it, but this thing does have that going on. I just wanted to share that. The muffler has been removed at some point, and the unit is there, but the muffler is not. And you know, I hate these mufflers. I wish that it would be okay to just fill these holes and forget about the muffler altogether, because I never use it on the toms. But I guess in this case we have all the hardware, but the muffler itself is not there. Maybe I'll try to find a replacement for that just so that it's complete, but it does not affect the playability of the set one bit. Alright, it's been about 3 hours since I've applied this glue. It says a half an hour will do, and not to really disturb it for about 24 hours, but we're not going to be doing too much here. We're just going to throw some heads on there and hear how it sounds. But let's at least remove the clamps and see what kind of glue job we got. Looks like there's still a little bit of void that I might fill in on this section here. It looks rock solid, so I don't think that it's in danger of moving, but doesn't look like it closed all the way up, but very, very close. That looks a lot better now. Well, folks, we've got some more bad news on the batter side of this 16-inch floor tom. There's more separation on this side, and it's actually a little worse than on the Rezo side. So it's not the end of the world, but it goes a little further around, and it looks like it's coming loose a little bit more, especially right here by the seam. So I want to glue this up and just be done with it. So I'm going to go ahead and repair this side as well, and that'll probably be it for me today on these, and I'll have to pick up tomorrow. But that's what we're looking at, some D-Lam. Before. And after. This one took a polish really nicely. Of course, there are a few areas that, you know, are less than perfect, but overall, we've got a really nice bass drum here. No delamination, no abuse whatsoever. This is just honest play wear and, you know, wear from being moved from gig to gig. But a very nice looking drum now. So if you've never gotten an up close and personal look at this Tama Superstar hardware, I believe the Imperialstar line of drums uses the same exact hardware as well from the late 70s, early 80s. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what you should expect to see on vintage Tama Superstar drums. This style of lug, this is the bass drum lug, by the way, and this is the claw and tension rod. And if you notice, it's got a square edge on inside of the claw. Again, this T-rod will later come with a knurled surface on the wings, but for now it's just straight chrome. So this is kind of early Superstar hardware, but it doesn't change too much over the next decade. We just get a few different appointments, but it keeps the basic shape and function. The tom lugs look like this. This is the same lug used for the rack toms and the floor toms. So if you were wondering what that looks like, it looks like this. And I don't know if this is a brass swivel nut. It's hard to tell. It looks kind of chrome-ish, but later on they do change to brass swivel nuts, I believe. At least that's what my later Superstar kit has on the same exact lugs. But the design doesn't change very much. There is a patent and a Japan marking inside these lugs, so maybe you can look at that if you're looking for authenticity. As far as the floor tom leg mounts, this is what that looks like. Very boxy, but rock solid, and yeah, just a nice cast part for the floor tom. And returning to the notion of the muffler, this is what the muffler should look like. The one in the 12-inch tom is broken right here across this slot, so the muffler part is missing. But this is what it should look like. This is a standard tom muffle. And they get rid of these as time goes on into the 80s. This is definitely an early Superstar and a Imperialstar / Royalstar / Swing Star type thing. And what you're looking at now are the spurs and the floor tom legs. This one with the bend is the floor tom leg. This straight one is the spur, but it has the exact same needled, kind of threaded foot on there. So if you want to have a really sharp point, you just wind this out and get it as sharp as you want. If you want 0 point, maybe you have a carpet or something like that, and it's fine. You can make it disappear altogether. And that's the case with both the spurs and the floor tom legs. Really nice design. So it's not the absolute perfect glue up, but it is 100% rock solid and fixed. I trained the camera on this spot. This is the most offending spot left on the shell, both the Rezo and the batter side. But you can tell that it's not squeezing. There's no air that is moving around in there, so it's pretty rock solid. It's just a bit of an air gap that formed there during the layup somehow. But otherwise, let's take a look at this thing. Everything else is looking great. This is the Rezo side, by the way. That's why I started with this one, because it's really the least important side. The batter head side is perfect. So once we get back to that offending spot right here, we'll swap it around. And here, this is just a little mark from the finish from when it was manufactured here. This is not a divot. It's actually just finish on the outside of the bearing edge. Well, let's cruise around this way this time and take a look at the previously delaminated bearing edge of the batter side. No gaps or little holes or pockets or anything. Everything's looking great. So this thing is considered repaired. And there we're back to the top. This is before. The floor tom does have some scratches and scrapes, just a little bit more so than the rest of these drums, but it's, again, not abused. It has never been destroyed in any way, just kind of gigged. So that's the before. Let's clean her up and get these things together. And here is after. Nice diagonal seam here, looks perfect. Here is our Tama logo with the serial number 91319, so a 5-number block letter T badge, so it's probably pre-1980. I'm thinking this is the 1979 kit after doing a little more research and digging and seeing what I could come up with. But it looks beautiful. That is Super Mahogany, even though it is all birch. All right, here she is, folks, all cleaned up, repaired where repairs were needed to be made, which was only on a small part of the 16-inch floor tom, but here it is all together, and this drum set sounds great. Feels great, looks great. It's just top-notch all around. Let's go ahead and get around the other side and see what it's like from the cockpit. So we're kind of backlit here, so sorry about that, but the only things that I didn't set up were the cymbal stands and the crash cymbals. I did get the hi-hat cymbal in here, which was easy enough to swap in, and I do have that camber hi-hat, 14-inch hi-hat right there. So we will get to hear that one, but we won't get to hear the other two cymbals. I just have my Zildjian hollow logo, 18 and a 16 medium crash here with my Ping Ride 20-inch. So that's the cymbal complement for this drum set, but I had these Remo Weather King heads that were just sitting around, and I decided that they had enough life to put them on here. They were better than the original Tama branded ambassador heads that came on here. So we get some, I don't know, 50% life Remo Weather King pinstripes, and eventually I'll change these out for some Evans heads, but I just happen to have this complement of heads, so I threw them on there. The snare, I did nothing to. I just threw it on the stand and let it rock, and it sounds amazing. The snare alone is just worth having from this set. But if you're going to have superstars, you might as well have superstars. So I believe that this is a 1979 set, and I didn't put the kick pedal on. I have my standard Iron Cobra kick pedal on here. But I do think this is a 1979 kit for the following reasons. Reason number one, our tension rods do not have the knurled surface. We talked about this earlier. It's just chrome. That changed in 1980. And this is kind of a satiny finish, and I believe they went to a high gloss also in 1980. This tom mount post here, this just the 4-bolt deal, that's pre-1980 as well, or actually it changed in 1980, but 1979 also had that style of receiver, whereas this is not the Omnisphere mount, which came about in 1980 as well. So this predates that. Again, 78, 79. That's what I'm thinking. The reason that I don't think that this is a 1978 kit is because everything that I can tell, pre-1979, we have re-rings inside of the toms. And these appear to be the standard 6mm shells that they kind of settled on after they went with the re-rings in the kind of mid to late 70s. So that's why I think it's a 79 versus a 78. Everything else would be identical between the 2 years, except for the re-rings from what I can tell, all the hardware and everything. This snare is the Hi-beat snare, and it was available in 1978, but again, I think it's also from 1979. And all of this hardware that came with it, it came about in 1978, 1979, unfortunately. So there's a possibility that this is a 1978 kit, but I don't think so because the serial number also has 5 digits starting with a 9, and that typically will be a 1979 serial number. So for those reasons, and maybe a few more, that's what I think we got here. 1979 Tama Superstars in Super Mahogany, which in pre-1979, it was actually called something else. I think Custom Mahogany or something like that. But that's what you'll find in the 78 catalog for the Superstar. It's a different name for the finish. What's really interesting to me is that I just so happen to have another set of Superstars over here in the Super Maple flavor, and it does have the same exact tom receptacle. That center post bracket is the same. So I believe this is a 1980 kit right before they changed that over. But you do see that we have the Omnisphere mount in 1980 plus, and that change is really significant because this mount is way superior to this one. If you just take a look, you can see that it's pretty basic, not much adjustability, and in fact, I found it kind of difficult to dial the spacing in. So if you can, maybe just try to upgrade it with a little bit later of an Omnisphere mount if you have this era of Tama drums, and you won't be disappointed. Otherwise, look how shiny these guys are. This is a full gloss Super Maple finish, and even the Super Mahogany of this era, 1980 forward, has a high gloss. And these are a satin. And they are very shiny because I polished the hell out of them with the one. But right now, they are not high gloss. They are the shallow depth shells, though, which is something that these have in common. This is something that I've been wanting for a while. This kit is exactly what I need to correspond to this one, which has a 24 by 16 inch kick, a 18 by 16 inch floor tom, and then the 13 by 9 and 14 by 10 inch, I believe, big toms on the rack. So big sizes, 13, 14, 18, 24. This is everything scaled down just a little bit, 12, 13, 16, 22 by 14, with our depths of 12 by 8, 13 by 9, and obviously 16 by 16. So I have every size minus the 10 inch, which I believe is available from this era, and maybe even an 8 inch tom, but those are super rare. So this is the kind of standard sizes. These are the plus size sizes, and between the two of them, they cover pretty much everything. So let's go ahead and play this thing and hear how she sounds.